Of your friends, fill them with food, and after a festive occasion, make them sit in a darkened room and show them 417 slides on your recent visit to Rivier Swellendam. Well, you stand as much a chance of losing your friends if you ask an older person to tell about his previous experiences, because they also may tend to make you lose friends. But anyway, I hope I'll have a friend by the end of this evening. And first, excuse any problems. English is my second and a half language, not my second language even. So excuse me if my English is lacking. Okay, here we go. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what Swellendam looked like, or what happened in Swellendam 50 years ago. Charlotte and I moved into Swellendam on the 1st of January 1957, having bought a practice here from Dr. Weich, who later became a very famous person. And about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we rode over this hill, and I entered a dead town. Here at the Drosday, a red cock who had survived, had a smile on his face because he had survived the festivities, came across the street and it disappeared. Then I went down the main road, and more or less at the post office there was a coloured chap cycling like mad down the road. And I can tell you, those were the only living things I saw until the next morning. The reason was, in those days, Swellendam closed down completely for the first 7 days of the year. The artisans, the businesses, the professional people, the smaller business people left town. And it was dead quiet. There were hardly people left. And you had to wait until after the 7th before you could get your car fixed or had anything done. The attorneys, they were gone. So we had no court cases. Anyway, it was even the municipality was closed. Can you imagine that? Only the state departments, post office, etc., they were open, and the banks, but they were also working on half a scale. So the town was very much like the experience you would have, as anybody would have, walking in the streets of Pompeii about 10 days after the earthquake. It was a dead town. Anyway, we came here. All we owned was an old motor car, one fridge, one divan, one mattress. And that was about, a red mat. And with that we moved into our house. Fortunately, Kay lent us a few pieces of furniture, but I had, on the 3rd of January, I had to knock up old Mr. Crawford. And he graciously opened the shop, and I bought 2 wardrobes. I can tell you still got them. Yeah. They now contain my hard liquor. But they're still there. And then after a week or so, Worcester opened. I went to Worcester and I bought a few wicker pieces of, and that's where we started. And that whole house where we're still living after 54 years. What is remarkable about it, that we're still living in the same house. And we didn't change it, but the house is exactly the way it was when we moved in there. That's enough about that. I want to tell you about the situation of transport in Swellendam. Swellendam had a train service, a regular train service. The PE Mail, which at night from Cape Town, it arrived in Swellendam at 10:30, and the return train from PE to Cape Town at 1:30. And there was a taxi. He tended the train every night. And for £0.50 he would pick you up and take you out. £0.50, that's 25 cents, ladies and gentlemen. The roads were quite different. The first time I passed through Swellendam, we still used the Rooibrug, as it's called, the red bridge at the bottom, because they were building the cement bridge, and they were at the early stages of the making of the N2. But most of the N2 from here to Mossel Bay and from Mossel Bay to Cape Town was a 2-lane tarred road, no wider than this, with a shoulder, and following the contours of the country. It went up and down, then it went round curves to miss rocks in the road. So it was a tortuous and rather uncomfortable ride, and it took you 3-4 hours to get to Cape Town. And if you didn't go by train and you had to use your car, it was that easy to Cape Town. It was a long day. People didn't go to Cape Town unless they needed to go there. If you want to see what the road looks like, if you go to Ashton, and near the turn of to Bonneville, you will look on your left and you'll see part of that road. It's still visible. But it was a great, great relief when the N2 was eventually finished. And that was as far as the transport was concerned. Now about the main street. That was one of the most controversial happenings ever in Swellendam. And I think it did as much harm to historic Swellendam as the Great Fire in 1860 or whatever. The problem was at that stage that the municipality got a subsidy from the provincial roads department. And when the new road was being built, and Swellendam, they said unless Swellendam upgraded their road to provincial standards, they would lose the subsidy. Well, it was like holding a gun against. There were many people who were very much opposed to this. But what it amounted to was that the road had to be widened, sidewalks had to be established. It also had to be leveled, because at those days it followed the contour as well. So many of the buildings, even today, you will see it's way down because of the leveling of the road. When I came to Swellendam, the main road was a beautiful sight. It was a long lane, like here, Swellendammers Street, with oaks on either side, right from here to the bottom of this down. And secondly, there were water furrows running on both sides, they being open. So it was, but it made for a very peaceful and a wonderful sight. Now with the widening of the road and the making of the sidewalks, it could only be done one way, and that was to widen the road, so the municipality in those days bought up, or actually forced you to give up property on the west side of the street. So many of the older buildings had their faces cut off or demolished, because It was the only way. And in the process of leveling or widening and building sidewalks, that meant the end of the oaks as well. A lot of people still feel very strong about it, and every reason. But today, looking back, I wonder, that road could never, never have served the present day cars and so I suppose it had to be done. After many years, many people tried to re-establish the oaks, but they never really took on. They died because the water was gone and they were filled up land, so trees didn't get enough nourishment. And over the years, many people tried and it didn't work. Now at last we've got some trees growing in the main street. And we're looking less like a desert town. But that is the end of it. Old Dr. Cook, she was the curator here, and she said over her dead body, they're not going to touch Swellendammers Street. And as you can see, Swellendammers Street, the part it was wide, unfortunately it was a bit wider, but it retained its oaks. It's still there. You've still got the water furrows on either side. And thanks to Dr. Cook, this little bit of Voortrecht Street is still the original. One has got to thank her for that. I think that's enough about the widening of the street. There were many people very unhappy. Mr. What's his name? Alec Powell. You know Powell House. He had the most beautiful 3 oaks in front of that house, which was chopped down and disappeared. But that is what happened. Whether it could have been prevented, I don't know. But there was although there was a lot of opposition, there was no organized body. But I think the municipality of the time didn't have any. Many businesses of the time disappeared. The needs of the population changed. And with it went a lot of old trades and things. Swellendam had 3 very active hotels. Only one is remaining, the Swellendam. It used to be the commercial hotel. But the Carlton Hotel is gone, the Hotel Ten Damme is gone.
Royal. Ja, ik denk nog weer Royal Hotel.
Dat was die Royal, ja. And those places existed from commercial travelers. Those days we didn't have emails, so a commercial traveler had to get around and come to every shop and take his orders. So these hotels were really dependent on their trade representatives. But those 2 hotels today, they're gone. We had 3 men's hairdressers. In those days we followed the GI cut, short backs and sides. So you were forced, all males were forced to go to the barber every 2 weeks, otherwise you looked unique. There were 3 of them and you had to sit long and wait for an opportunity to get a haircut. There were 2 cobblers, because people still had shoes that could be mended and resold. They're gone. We had 1 harness maker. People were still using animals on the farms. So there was a big business, a harness maker. There was a flour mill. Everybody, there wasn't bought a wheat to town to have it moved. That was where the opposite the commercial hotel, where the fish and shop is. That was the site of the mill. And there were quite a couple of people, and it went day and night. And there were quite a lot of people working there. There were two more garages and agencies. They're gone. We had a Volkswagen agency where the office at the restaurant there. And we had English model cars at Slukky's garage down on the corner, which is host today the co-op. That was Slukky's garage. He sold English models. There were two places where you could buy petrol in the main road. One was where Tony's, that was the original place for the Koch garage. And they had petrol pumps in front of that place. And just opposite where the office is, that was a garage and they had petrol pumps. But with the widening of the street, all these pumps were already left. So there are only two garages, thankfully maybe, in the main street. There was one blacksmith doing a wonderful trade, and it kept very busy in Murray Street. And then there was an independent bakery, which was in that building where the restaurant is, opposite Ford Garage on the corner there, that old building. That was a bakery. But there were two very important businesses. Was a cool drink factory at the corner of Murray Street and Fort Trek Street, opposite Old Powell's house. And they served the community and the surrounding towns with aerated water. And it was quite a big business. And another thing that was a huge business was Halser's Press. That was where they've got a lot of, next to the magistrate's office. That press served a huge community and agencies all over the Cape Province. And they did work for places like Kakamas and Uppington. A big, big business. That's gone. Okay, now what about the population? Swellendam, of course, the population was much, much smaller. Can't tell you numbers. But we had mixed residence areas. The main areas being Lemmetjiesdorp, that is in the Glen. There was quite a community there. There were lots of coloured houses in Berg Street. And there was quite a lot of brown families living in Van Eden Street and Murray Street. And these people, we lived all together and there was no problem. I think this is one of the most gruesome things that happened to the society when these people were moved away because they were the upcoming middle class. And if we had them still today, we would have a different political situation altogether. Because they were living amongst whites as if they were whites. Poor, but living in a... And I think it was never realized what we did to those people, the middle class people. We dumped them there amongst the other crowd, and their children, well, it's more like this. The civilization is drawn down if the majority is at the lower level. So we did that to those people. I don't think it was ever realized. There was only one school for colored kids in town, and that was in Murray Street. How many kids they had, I don't know, but one must remember there were many, many smaller schools in the district for colored kids. And they were under the auspices of the churches. The Anglican Church used to have many of them at Seabrook and Kliphoogte all over. And these schools were managed by the ministers. And I can tell you, it was run in a proper manner. Those schools were run with discipline and with quality teaching. Afterwards, the government came and said, get out you churches, we want to do it on our own. And that was the beginning of the right. There was a primary school for white kids, and that was in Ters Weich Street, where the Blow Bikies is now. A beautiful building, but it became too small. And it's sad to see that absolute beautiful building going to wrong. People in the past have tried over many years to get some sort of way to to keep this in good repair, but I think it belongs to the government. So there's no, but that was a beautiful building. Later on, the new school was built down at Ters Weich Street, or across the road, which was an improvement. It was fair. And then there was the high school, which where it is today. As for other population groups, we had 7 Jewish families living in Swellendam. Wonderful people who became totally integrated into the society. They mostly were Afrikaans speaking. And Oscar and O'Gurley, Biersky actually sang in the choir of the Dutch Reformed Church. So it was Renton was only a small area across the rails. If you go up Ressisbaan Street and you look at the development on your left, there are quite a few streets. Those were the only coloured houses. So the coloured community of the town was much smaller. But there were many, many coloured families squatting in the rivers and bushes and around town. But these people now lived a good life, quite normally. When they were pushed off the farms, of course, the municipality had to provide accommodation, and we saw more and more houses going up this road. As for black people, it was to see a black person walk down the streets of Swellendam caused a many concerned mother to call her kids in. and because the swart gevaar, you know, that was a hearing. That swart gevaar. So a black man was never seen in Swellendam. There were lots of people. People peered through the window to see what a black man looks like. They wouldn't look at you. Once, we're talking about swart gevaar, we also had the Roomse gevaar. There was a convent where the present church is, the Roman Catholic Church, a zinc thing, double story. And there were about 40 nuns at that time. They were of a sort of silent order. You never saw them. But they worked there behind, they made all kinds of things. But and then later they built that place down at the bottom of the street. But for many years they were housed, and the Roman Catholic Church was built. We had quite a lot of colourful priests, Roman priests over the years. Old Father Urban was quite the eccentric bloke. he was wounded during the last hours of the Second World War. And there was very little left of his old body. And he was a most jovial old chap, but a bit eccentric. You used to see them in the middle of a rainstorm watering the garden. and whenever you walked past a party, you went in. He invited himself. And he enjoyed parties. And when he had a few lemonades, he started singing in Spanish. He was a wonderful old chap. Very much, man. Now what? Listen, how long of it?
As long as you like.
No, but farming. Those days, the varieties of wheat only ripened during December. So it was a rush for the farmers to bring in their crops before they could go down to the sea in February. So, and the grain, there wasn't, the silos were not there, so the wheat were all packed or brought into town in sacks. And we had these huge mountains of wheat sacks there next to in Cooper Street for the Tomlinson firm, and then the co-op had their stacks behind the station. But huge. And you know, as far as I know, never was a bag stolen. They were open. Those were the days of the grain. But the biggest industry that ever struck Swellendam was the youngberry industry. A Canadian by the name of Don Thompson came to town and he started a canning factory there on the next side of the station. And he had a prosperous business, and the farmers started planting youngberries. At one stage, youngberry fields extended right from the glen through down the road to what's that place, the hotel, and Ters Weich. It was one huge industry. Did you know that Ters Weich, the original name is Pushpasvallei in the old VOC days, Pushpasvallei. And do you know that the first hops in this country was produced in Ters Weich? Another interesting fact. At one stage, South African breweries wanted to buy out the whole of Ters Weich. And they wanted to establish the hops industry here, except apart from George. But they said they would only enter Swellendam provided they had every farm, and there were farmers who didn't want to sell. So the hops industry died a sudden death. But it's interesting, there is a heck of a potential for hops in Ters Weich. But anyway, old Don started this berry business, and the farmers planted berries like mad. As I say, it was one big berry field from up top of the town right down to Clipper. The colored community was utilized as the pickers. And the farmers had to go as far as Heidelberg to get pickers. But this picking of berries brought in a heck of a cash income into the community. These people were earning good money. I must say, sorry to say, the kids were involved as well. After school, the kids were fetched and they also went into the berry fields. But things were looking very, very good. The farmers were paid according to weight. Old Don had a scale there, and then the youngberries were picked in trays. And the more astute and prosperous and far-seeing farmers made sure that these trays were kept in the dam to increase the weight. But towards the end of the berry season, the juice already had sucked into the trays and everybody was profiting. And old Don, the thing went good. And then the embargo came. And old Don lost his market in Canada and the USA. And he became financially into difficulties. And he stopped buying berries. The farmers had to take out the berries. We've only got 3 berry farmers left. And we don't know how long they're going to exist because of the high cost of harvesting them. His son, O'Donnell, left again for Canada, and left his son behind. He struggled on for a while, and then he had to sell up. And in those days you couldn't take money out of this country, not for the love of it. But he was clever. He went to Cape Town and he bought himself the most expensive yacht you could buy with the money he had available. He sailed his money. Good for you. Old Don, I think, he's one person we should have a monument, because he really made a difference in the berry industry. Old Don was an interesting person. He and his wife started Purity Foods on their kitchen table with a pressure cooker and a primus. And it developed into a huge project, and he sold it eventually to Rickett, and he made quite a bit of money. And that money he used to make this factory, to build this factory. How much? Culture. I wouldn't say Swellendam was a place for cultural feast ever. More like a party place. But we had a very active play reading club, which performed every couple of months. Excellent productions. We had a vibrant music society of over 100 members. The arts were well subsidized by the government at this stage, and they financed excellent artists, South African artists, but many well-known international artists performed here in Swellendam because of the subsidy. And that was a wonderful institution. We were really treated to the best musical and dramatic things that you can expect. We had a remarkable town choir. And there are still recordings. I don't know whether you've ever heard them. But they were tops. But then the choir leader left. He was a teacher here, and then the thing came. Of course, there were bridge clubs. But the main cultural thing was the bioscope. That was where J.D. shoe place is. Now, we had shows on a Wednesday evening, and then 2 shows on Friday and Saturday nights. And they were usually packed. Next to the theatre was he had a restaurant there. So during interval, everybody went to the restaurant, and the film didn't start until everybody has had to eat. So then it was started. And wonderful programs. These cereals were very popular. You remember them? Zorro and the likes of that. It was always a scene where a man went with his motor car over a precipice, and the next woofstick, as it was were called, you could see straight out of the car went down, and he gave his opponents hell until the end of the next chapter. That was very, very popular. That brought the people back, especially the colored people. And then there were travelogues. Fitzpatrick, I don't know whether you remember them. And he always had these wonderful travelogues and going to all kinds of places. I will tell you about it at the end of this. And then there were the comics, Mickey Mouse, whoever. And then there were many adverts, of course. The travelogues were very, very, and then of course there were the newsreels. Da 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 da. That's the African mirror. Never mind, at the time when these reels came to Swellendam, they were not news anymore. They were history. It was good. The type of film that we saw changed over the years. You don't realize it, you oldies. Remember, we had these love stories, of course, sad, and we had cowboy films. Now the makers of cowboy films realized that their plots were quite difficult, and that made it easier because they left clues who were the crooks and who were the villains. It was easy once you got to know this. The good people wear white Stetsons and they rode on white horses, whereas the villains wore black hats and they rode on black horses. So for the most casual, astute viewer, you could know who was the villain. And then there were the musicals. Betty Grable, Ginger Rogers, Fred Astaire. These people, wonderful musicals. Today, if you would see them, I don't think you would be so impressed, but we love them. And there were such beautiful girls. You know, I'm still in love with June Ellison. She was the most beautiful thing that ever happened. And as you say, the films were I think everybody looked at the film, the bicycle, as the major attraction in town. Anyway, we loved our vicar. I've got to hurry up. I've got how much longer?
As long as you like that.
I want to talk about the sport. Of course, rugby was the major. The white, there was a coloured team across the way, but the whites, of course, pure white. Had 3 teams. And everybody tried to get into these 3 teams. They actually had people who reserves. And these teams played all over. And it was wonderful how much rugby meant to the people. Every now and again a minor war broke out. When Swellendam played Bredasdorp, the followers came from all over. They parked their cars right around the rugby field, under the trees and things. They didn't like the what the referee did, they hooted. And insults were thrown from the grandstand, you know, people offering a pair of glasses for poor referee. But anyway, it was keen. People were so keen on rugby. And at one of these occasions, we had a burgomaster, Uncle Mike. He never really mastered Afrikaans. And one night during the festivities, he thanked the referees and he referred to them as skeidsmeesters. Of course, everybody enjoyed it tremendously. But now let it be said that at that stage of the proceedings where people have had a couple of drinks, they would have laughed at the quotation from Shakespeare as well. But it was much appreciated. Uncle Mike was a wonderful old person. He served here as the burgomaster for many, many years. But anyway, and then behind the rugby grounds were the people who played Jokskei. Now that was a fairly new game. It originated during the trek things. And there were these people in white hurling beaks of excellent firewood across open space onto a stick. But let it be said, they enjoyed it. Good to them. Where the present tennis courts are was the tennis club. We had 2 clay courts, and which was not always kept in good repair because people liked playing, but they didn't like rolling. A funny thing happened though during the tennis. The Maxi went out during the war, and the Mini was introduced onto the tennis courts. And to today, there's been a lot of scientific research done on this, but suddenly tennis became a spectator sport. Nobody knows why. And the golfing crowd. They were well known. They played up there where they are now. They had a little shack that served as the clubhouse, and the greens and the fairways. The fairways were fairly rocky. It was made looked like a badly made rock garden. It was only later that they covered it, and it became much smoother. But these people were known for their very competitive spirit during the 19th hole. and many a day well, we all know this is scientific stuff, especially in the southwestern districts. The occurrence of dark and the cool night air interfered with your ability to look at the clock. and secondly, it also interfered with your compass. You couldn't get home. So these people were known that they often arrived a little bit late to their nearest and dearest. And but one story, this is a true story. This was told to me by one of the party. He said they went to play at Robertson. He said, and after the game there was much entertainment and goodwill and festivities. So they only got to leave Robertson after dark. And as they came on the way, they developed a sudden deep urge for further sustenance and hydration. And then the oasis suddenly appeared on them. There was the hotel at Ashton. So this gallant lot started into the bar, he said, and there was excellent company. And he said, a most competent bartender. And amongst the local populace there was a blind man. And he said, oh, and as the evening wore on, it became a wonderful part in the deep, deep friendships were formed. Eventually, when the barman got rid of the lot and got them onto the pavement, they were ready to go home. But this poor blind man, turned out he lives on the plot, the way out from the hotel, and didn't have any way of getting there. So of course these people were brimming over benevolence. And they said, no, they will see him home. No, certainly, but he's got to guide them. Yes, certainly, he will guide them. And so they went, and the chap said, is there a gate here in front of you? And they would all look and they would all agree, yes, there is a gate. Even the driver could see there was a gate. And then they would go through the gate. And then he would say, you see a fork in the road here? Yes, they see a fork, by consensus. They could see it, no problem. He said, take the left one. And after a while he said, they got to a house. He says, is there a house here? Yes, there's a house. This is my house. He said, now, I would like to show my gratitude. Would you like to come in? And these people felt, well, you know, after the rough ride through the country, they needed certain sustenance. He said, no, they will come in for a drink. So they went in. He said, but the blind man failed to light a light, so they sat in the dark. He said an amazing thing. This fellow hauled out a bottle of a cupboard and he started pouring drinks. He said he didn't waste one drop. And as things got nicer and they asked him, would you like to hear music? Yes. It happened that they were all music lovers. What a wonderful occurrence, coincidence. So he hauled out the gramophone and he said another miracle happened. In the dark, this chap put down the arm right on the first groove. And he said the night wore on. With, you know, intelligent talk and philosophical discussion and good music in the background and good company, things got a bit late. And towards dawn, it's also dawned on them that they had to get home. So this friend of mine walked into his home and he found a very, very upset wife. He thought at the time she was rather unreasonable because he could explain the whole situation. And she said, what the hell, where were you? And he said he thought about this. It was no good telling this woman this unfortunate delay was the cause of a love for their fellow man who was in trouble. And they had to see him home. And this was the reason why they were delayed. He said, but at that stage he thought, to hell with us, she won't believe it. So he went to bed and had a good sleep, Sunday morning sleep.
Don't stop the story there, Charlie.
I have just a few, I think I've got time for that. I didn't touch on the medical side, that is most interesting. The establishment of the hospital, the building of the jail there in Buffalo. There's long histories attached to that lot, but I haven't got time. Just a few odds and ends. As I was district surgeon, now the duties of a district surgeon, if I was for 10 years, were fairly varied, but it came down that you had to do all the medical legal work, tend to all the assaults, you had to appear in court and testify for most of these cases, terrible. And I had to tend the beatings in the jail there, when they had cuts given. And I tell you, that's one of the most gruesome things. that I had to witness. And there was a Mr. Ralston, he was the chief of the jail. He had arms like the legs of a poker table, I mean, billiard table. And he let go. And I tell you, to see that flesh open, they had a little thing over the buttocks. Flesh open actually like not open, but a blue thing. But there was always, all the other people were taken into the cells during this meeting, but one or two of these pals had to support they're like a horse. And I remember once this chap crying, moaning, and this chap here said, "Man, moet jy so skei nie, ek voel al niks." He said, "Peter, stay quiet, I don't feel anything." We had to attend to court many a time, and once, in those days we didn't have a full-time public prosecutor. One of the policemen acted as prosecutor. And we had a chap here, he used to love jawbreakers. And now this, well, the Afrikaans people will understand. And this was a case where there was a disputed parentship. He was asking the woman, the complainant, he says, now, erken jy, and he used these big words, dat jy vleeslike gemeenskap gehad het met hierdie Maria. And the chap said, nie vreeslik, net so nou en dan. One night, and this is the last, one night we were sitting in my house and a woman called, and she was obviously fall pregnant and a neighbor, and she'd been shown away from the hospital because we tried to get these people to attend antenatal clinics, and they said, we're not going to take your children and have your births in the hospital unless you attend antenatal for their own good. But one night a woman came there and she was sent down from the hospital. And I said, now I started preaching to her. I said, why the hell didn't you attend antenatal clinics? And that and that and that. They said, okay, we'll go to the hospital. And she walked out of my consulting rooms were there where I live now. And she walked out towards, and under the big old oak tree there, she knelt down. And the next moment, wow! There was a baby. Full of gravel and sand. Yeah, Charlotte brought some paper, newspaper and a towel. And we delivered the placenta. But what was remarkable, she still had her pants on. This baby had slipped right by the side of the pants. Well, the baby was full of gravel, and I took it by the legs, and I walked to the tap there, and I pulled the tap, and I washed it down. And it started wailing, and of course that's a good sign in this. One Christmas day, about afternoon, on a terribly hot day, I was called to the Hermitage, and it found a newborn lady there fitting. It was having fits. And I examined the kid and I realized it was due to a heat stroke. Measured the temperature, and it was in those days 107, that's, I don't know, it's supposed to be legal. I gave it some paraldehyde, which we used that, and then I walked down to the little streamlet there in the Hermitage. And I held the baby in the stream and allowed it to cool. And after a while, it stopped fitting. And it looked all right, and I left. And a couple of years later, her mother came to me and said, "You remember that baby you held in the water there?" I said, "Yes." "Well, here he is," and he was about a youngster. And he looked from outside quite good. I didn't ask him to count until 10, so I don't know his mental capacity, but anyway, he survived. Maybe one more story. One night I was called to Moranskraal, and another problem got there, what we call a shoulder presentation. The way she was in labor, the arm came out first. And then the baby just can't be born. It's an emergency. Today, people wouldn't know, but we were taught how to deal with it. But there I was in this dark room with a little paraffin thing with a wick, a flickering light, and I asked for water. And they went to the dam and they got some water there full of all kinds of fauna and flora. And I washed my hands, put on a pair of gloves, wash my hands again. And in those days we called the internal version. Today they wouldn't even think about it. What you do is you push the baby up again. And then turn it round inside the uterus, grab the feet, pull them out, and make sure you turn them like the back was showing up front. And you delivered it as a breech. And I had nothing more than morphine. So I injected the woman morphine, washed my hand in this terrible dish of water, and did the internal version. And that baby survived. I don't know, it's not serving on the prison cabinet, but I'm sure it's all right. Ladies and gentlemen, I see distinct signs, telltale signs that people have become restless. I see twitching in the face. I can see people reaching into their pockets for rotten tomatoes. So, I thank you. And in the words of Fitzpatrick, he used to end all his travelogues this way. And here I will reluctantly say goodbye to Hawaii, leaving footprints in the sands of time. Thank you.
Dr. Weich, as a recent incomer to Swellendam, I must say this is one of the most enjoyable evenings of stories about old Swellendam that I've ever experienced. And to hear about the old days when Swellendam was a small local place with local produce, local business, local trades and industry, it's just wonderful. I've spent hours poring over the old 1948 or whatever it is aerial photograph and tried to imagine my way into what it was like. And listening to you has just brought it all alive. Thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you.